Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Thermal Gard Podcast. And today we have a guest that I'm really excited about. I've been wanting to meet him a long time, and we finally got him on. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Joe Nott.
Hey, guys.
Raabe Ford.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Excited to be part of this. And I've wanted to do a podcast for a while, and it just landed in my lap one day there at the Best of the Region there that night. So it was nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was. It was crazy. I literally looked around and I saw you. I was like, man, where do I know that guy from? And then then we introduced ourselves, and I was like, of course, it's Joe. So awesome. Well, Joe, honestly, full transparency from my end. So like I said, I've known who you are a long time. And in preparation for this podcast, I started looking more at your background.
Okay, yeah.
And the more I looked, I was like, all right, I'm going to stop looking because there's so many things we could talk about. We could probably be here for 10 hours, honestly, talking about your previous career and all
Sure,
that.
yeah, there's a lot to it.
Oh, yeah.
And
I want to get into it.
Okay.
So I quit doing research on purpose. But, Joe, if you would kind of take us back to where you grew up, childhood, and how you got into your hobbies.
Man, so yeah, I grew up right here in Lima, born in St. Rita's, and pretty much grew up in Shawnee. Went to the Shawnee school system. Did spend a few years and went to Temple Christian.
Okay.
Surprisingly, 4th through 8th grade, and then I had a wild hair and decided I wanted to go back to public school. That's where most of my friends were, so my parents allowed that. Ended up graduating from Apollo, though, so I took senior year marketing and management at Apollo, and really enjoyed that. That also offered me time. I was working for my father at Allen Nott Honda Toyota, and I was working, I think in the parts department in my senior year. And so going to Apollo got me out of school at noon, so then I could go work for my dad the rest of the afternoon.
That sounds great. Okay, so you graduated from Apollo.
Correct.
But correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of started racing before you graduated,
Well before that. Yeah, I actually started racing at Cridersville Speedway. A lot of people know about that track at 8 years old in a go-kart. My family, my grandfather, my dad, were both into sprint car racing at the time.
Okay.
We go back a lot of years into the 1940s. My grandfather had a sprint car and a midget team.
Really?
And then that went away until the mid-'80s, early 80s when I was 8 years old. Put me in a go-kart, and a few years later, they had a World of Outlaw sprint car team. And that just kind of accelerated the whole family's exposure and excitement around racing.
Okay. Can you walk us through kind of some of the family history and then why you were in it so young?
Yeah. So grandfather Allen Nott was into, like I said, sprint car racing, midget racing in the late 40s, early 50s. And then that came to an end until the mid-'80s when a gentleman named Steve Myers Service. A lot of people know who Steve is, farmer down in Cridersville. And I think just through my grandfather talking to him, it kind of sparked that interest again. And before I knew it, I was a young kid. I didn't know any of this was happening in the background. And they struck a deal, and they built a sprint car, and they hired a driver. Mark Kinzer was the first driver, Steve Kinzer's cousin, I believe. And then they started racing for about the next 4 to 5 years and had some high-level drivers. So we started with Mark Kinzer, and then they had a gentleman named Dave Blaney, and then we had Keith Kaufman, and another guy named Gene Lee Gibson. He was a modified driver at the time. But so through all of that, I'm a kid growing up 8, 9, 10 years old racing go-karts, also going to sprint car racing. And I could make this really long. I'll try not to, but just one thing led to another. So by the time I was a junior in high school, they had this new kind of series that was mini sprints. So they were a scaled down size of a sprint car that had motorcycle engines in them. They were 1,200cc engines. And a lot of Lima people would recognize the name Tim Allison. Tim and I were actually teammates my first year when I was junior in high school. We built 2 identical cars in his shop at his house. He was running Allen Nott Honda Kawasaki at the time for us, the motorcycle shop. And so we went racing for the next 2 years together. And just kind of, one thing led to another. And I guess once I was thinking about college and what am I going to do next after high school, good, bad, or indifferent, I was not a scholastic person. School, I had too many things in my brain that I wanted to do, and college was not one of them, unfortunately. But I tell you, going into racing for a career at that point in my life did so much more for me, I think, than college could have, because I didn't have the room to screw around, party, and do all that. I had to be places that I needed to be and schedule and all that kind of stuff. So at 19 years old, I moved out and we started an ASA race team. ASA stands for American Speed Association. It was a series that I raced in for the next 8 years, from the time I was 19 till about the time I was 30. And yeah, there was a lot of good times, raced against a lot of good people. At that young age, when I was a senior in high school, my father and I had been going to Indianapolis to watch a young Jeff Gordon race midgets at Indianapolis Raceway Park. It was a race called Thursday Night Thunder. It was on ESPN. And my father knew John Bickford, which is Jeff's stepfather. So we used to go over there and watch him. And a few times we would stop at the shop and talk to him beforehand. So we developed a relationship with them. And Jeff Gordon was actually very influential in my path as far as racing. Because at that point, I'll say that Days of Thunder was a new movie out and really caught my interest about what stock car racing really was at that time, even though my family was really into sprint car racing. And I was in this dilemma, like, am I going dirt racing or do I want to, go asphalt racing? And so John Bickford gave me Jeff's phone number. That happened to be the first year that Jeff was in Busch Grand National for Bill Davis Racing, Baby Ruth sponsored car. So I called Jeff. He said, hey, why don't you just come down and stay with me for a week or so? I'll take you to Bill Davis Racing, take you around Charlotte, show you all the race shops. And I mean, that happened. And I was hook, line, and sinker. I mean, I was all about stock car racing at that point. Jeff Gordon was relatively unknown, even though he was coming up through the ranks really quick. Mm-hmm. And it was just a neat time. And that kind of set my path for stock car racing at that point in my life.
Oh, man. Okay. Couple things I want to dive into. First of all, what is your kind of takeaway, or what did you notice about Jeff Gordon that's maybe different or unique? Because, I mean, he's kind of a legend now at this point.
Yeah, right.
So you knew him before that. Mm-hmm. Was there any characteristics or anything that stood out to you in those early years?
I think that without knowing it at the time, the thing that I look back and recognized about him is that he's just real. He's genuine. And he wasn't trying to act like anybody else. He was just trying to be Jeff and be the best Jeff that he could be. And I think and I know maybe that's a little cliche or whatever, but I think that he was just truly genuine. In my interactions with him, even after that fact, he went on to be multi-NASCAR champion and was not easy to stay in contact with, right? So I still would place a phone call once in a while, and he if he didn't answer, he would always call me back. And that's where I think somebody like that, he didn't have to call me back. He had no reason to talk to me at that point in time, but he did.
Wow, that's amazing. So another thing, I want to jump back to like when you were young, first getting into racing, you talked about building your own go-kart. What were some of those early lessons, or what were those early lessons that maybe your grandfather or your dad taught you after you started racing that kind of transferred to shape you as a young man moving into the rest of your life?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so much that racing the analogies can transfer right over into life. Smooth is fast, slow is fast, controlled. There's so much that goes into it. We can make big, bold moves, but sometimes if you're not calculated in those moves, it may send you in a totally opposite direction you need to go in. So I think just slowing down, being aware of what's coming ahead of you. Sometimes you don't always know, but if you express a little caution, there's one ASA race that I won that I'll refer to. It's the only ASA race I ever won, but it was at a track in Buffalo, New York, Lancaster Speedway. It was an odd track. The front stretch was actually part of the drag strip there. So it also had a circle oval track kind of into that. So the front stretch was a drag strip, but it was a very hot day in June. It was 95 degrees out, and the asphalt literally started coming apart. And I still to this day think the only reason I won that race was I was one of the first guys to figure out that you actually had to slow way down. I was lifting out of the throttle at the flag stand and letting the car just kind of roll easy, and the weight transfer wasn't so violent going into the corner. And there were half a dozen guys that crashed in that race because they were just trying to hot dog it in the corner, trying to pass somebody, and it was really loose gravel, and they'd spin out and hit the wall. So I think just lucky for me, I'd figured it out soon enough, and then some of the other good guys crashed, and I didn't. So kind of fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. And then another thing you mentioned, you chose racing instead of college.
Correct.
And you said, I think that transferred really well. Mm-hmm. Tell us maybe, let's say 3 things that you think racing taught you that college never could.
Yeah. So I would say at the very most basic level, the thing that it taught me was a gentleman named Gary Saint Amant. He was a guy that we hired basically that I moved into his race shop, and he took me under his wing and kind of helped us build our cars. But the one thing that we did in that shop every day without fail was you picked everything up, you swept the floors, you put all your tools away. There's a grease spot on the floor, you wiped it up. So it was just like, so that when you came in the next day, everything was in its place. You knew where it was, and you could just pick right back up. So many race shops you see, there's tools everywhere, parts everywhere. You spend half your day trying to find stuff. So I think at a very basic level, it was just that. Just clean up at the end of the day, put all your stuff away. Everything has its place, put it there. So I would say that's one thing. Another thing is that I think at the end of the day, racing, one thing that it does different, or maybe other stick and ball sports do as well, is at the end of that week, you know where you stand. Whether you practiced or had any, if you went to test or you had any practice before that, you pretty much knew where you stood at the end of that week, every week. Or sometimes, like in the car business, we're measured by months, right? So we get to the end of the month, how many cars do we sell, how many parts, how much service did we do? So I think in that regard, it was weekly. So you didn't have those longer stretches of time to really know where you stood. Outside of that, I think travel. I think travel was key in creating myself, essentially becoming Joe. When you don't have the opportunity to go other places and see other things, you don't get that culture. You don't realize how much is out there and how easy it is to kind of adapt yourself to those different environments. But at the end of the day, you still have to be yourself. So I think just traveling around, meeting so many different people, it was just an interesting time to kind of learn about other people, which I would take little nuggets from what other people did and try to emulate that and try to add that to my repertoire of who I am.
Yeah. So let's jump back into your story then. So you said you were at AMA for 8 years?
ASA, American Speed Association.
American
Yep.
Speed Association. Mm-hmm. So you're there for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of talk us through your growth and development just as a racer, but also the team and the organizations, maybe sponsors that kind of backed you and how those changed over the years?
Yeah. So again, at 19 years old, I was didn't know much about stock car racing, had a lot to learn ahead of me. And the first thing, my first goal really was finish the race, don't crash, right? Doesn't mean I had to finish on the lead lap. It just means I had to finish the race and not take anybody out, not knock the wall down. And that seriously was the first goal. And interesting enough, the very first test session was at Nashville Fairground Speedway in, this would be 1992. And the all-time series champion at that time, his name was Mike Eddy. It was a test session. It wasn't even a race. And we didn't really use radios at that time. Some people were, some people weren't. I sailed off into turn 3, lost control of the car, spun it out, luckily didn't hit anything. Unfortunately, Mike Eddy was about half a lap behind me, and he didn't have radios, and he didn't know that I had spun out. So he came sailing into turn 3 and saw me, turned it sideways and clobbered me. It didn't even make it to my first race before I crashed my first car.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So talk about a life lesson right there, right? I mean, it really wasn't necessarily my fault. Yeah, I did spin the car out, but it was just a circumstance where he didn't happen to have his radios on. It was just a test session. So I don't know, moving forward into racing, there's so much that I think as a team, teams morph. And, the one thing we used to say about a team is that we spend more time together than most husbands and wives and families do. At that point, we were living in an apartment together. We were riding to work together, eating lunch together, working together, traveling together. We knew everything about each other, and a lot of stuff we didn't want to know on top of that. But I think when you're together that much, that requires a lot of communication and a lot of patience and understanding and being willing to kind of let some things go that maybe frustrate you about other people.
Yeah. Can you walk us through, as the driver, everybody has a key role on a race team, but a driver, they usually get the spotlight, which usually comes with added pressure. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about, the highs with your team as well as the lows and how it felt as the driver, either, taking them to the top or letting them down? Yeah.
So a couple good examples of that are, because I think that was part of what grew me up so fast, was having to hire and fire people at a young age. That's not easy to do, and nobody likes firing anybody, but at the same time, I had a career path, and I didn't necessarily always know where that path was leading. But there was a point from 92 to 94 that I had a race shop in Columbus, and we had the same 2 or 3 guys that worked together in the same shop. And then in 95, I had an opportunity to move to Michigan and start a different team. We had hired another crew chief, but that also came with the challenge of, hey guys, I'm moving up to Michigan, and I don't know that it's in the cards for all of us to move up there. I have an opportunity. I'm going to have to move, which means I don't have a job for you anymore. And we were living together again. So we're still friends to this day, which is pretty cool. To be able to manage all of that and at a young age say, sorry, I got to take a different path. So that was a real difficult thing. But then we hadn't won any races, I was still gaining my confidence, still gaining my experience in racing. As I moved to Michigan and we hired this new crew chief, his name was Chris Bradley. And Chris and I hired all new people, started a new shop. And one highlight of that first year was the very last race of the year in 1995. We had a very fast car, and we led most laps of that race. It was a 400-lap race at Jennerstown Speedway, and it came down to a last lap crash, essentially across the finish line, that Bob and I crashed for the win. This is the interesting thing about that story. I had 2 flat tires during that race at separate times. So I had to come in and pit under green flag, which means I went a lap down twice and came back to lead the race, plus led most of the laps of that race, only to crash on the last lap and finish second. So talk about, almost feeling like hero to zero. And that race is still it's on YouTube today. You can look it up, but you can still see the frustration in my face. And I still thought I had won that race, even during that interview when Ralph Shaheen stuck a microphone in my face. And what do you think about finishing second? And I had a perplexed look on my face because I was so upset, and I felt like that was my win. But I had to accept second place and just essentially came back and finally won my first race the following season. The interesting part about that was when I finished first, Bob Seneker is the guy I crashed with at Jennerstown. He happened to finish second in the race that I ended up winning.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what was, I guess, the biggest thing you learned from crashing and taking second?
Humility, just being able to realize that, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, it was still a fantastic race. We made a lot of kind of like what we're trying to do here, trying to gain exposure, right? I'm trying to become a NASCAR driver. That was the path I was on. And the more exposure, sometimes good and bad, is good. Mm-hmm. And one thing that back in the day, there was a radio commentary gentleman that was on at noon every day, Paul Harvey. I don't know if anybody recognizes that name, but I happened to be driving home the following day, and we were listening to the radio, and he made a comment about that crash on his storyline that day, which just kind of made my day.
That's awesome. One thing I've always been curious about too is, racing is a professional sport. Like all the drivers, they are athletes. Sure. Physically, you have to be in shape. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a great point about racing is I would say there are a lot of misconceptions. You do have to be physically fit to drive a car. Equally so, if not more, mentally fit. And the thing is about racing that there's a lot of studies out there now today about racing and the amount of mental focus that it takes to drive a car. When you're under a green flag situation, you're racing inches off of every car that's around you, and that takes a certain amount of focus. Not to mention that it can be 110, 120, 130 degrees inside the car, and you're dealing with heat. Your feet might be burning because the floorboard's hot. If you're running good, you don't feel all that stuff. But if you're 10th place, 12th place, then you realize, my feet are burning. I'm tired. I'm sore. I'm sweating. I'm out of water to drink. There's all that comes into play. But I think at the end of the day, there's just a lot to learn about. Trying to win a race. If you just stay focused, you do good. If you lose focus, bad things happen. And I think the thing about focus is when you're racing, I don't know how to bring that into light, but you're right there off, inches off somebody else's bumper. And if you lose focus for a second, he happens to just touch the brake just for a second, then you're not paying attention. You're going to hit that guy and you're going to cause him to crash, or the guy behind me. So I don't know. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. What were some things you did to strengthen yourself mentally?
Back in the day, it was kind of, I don't know. I used to ride bicycles a lot when I was a kid, and I still do to this day. I wasn't into cycling at that point. The big thing in the mid 90s was rollerblading for whatever reason. I lived in Michigan for 3 years, and that was the hot thing to do up there. So I bought a set of rollerblades, and I just about every day I lived in Grand Haven, Michigan, and they have a nice boardwalk out there that goes all the way out to the beach. And they had a nice hill that would go up, and so I just rode around on that. I did hire a trainer at that point in time, but we focused more on cardio endurance than actual physical endurance. And I think the other thing, as I progressed into racing and moved down south, I hired a different trainer, and we got into some of the mental focus. And in fact, I did a pretty deep level with Tai Chi, which is an interesting thing where I learned all the moves of Tai Chi to the point where I could close my eyes, stand on one foot, go through all the motions, and then the point of that was I was training to race at Charlotte Motor Speedway in an ARCA car. And basically I had tested there, and he just said, when you're standing there doing your Tai Chi with your eyes closed, visualize yourself making laps at Charlotte. Every time you cross the finish line, say now. So I'm doing the Tai Chi, 1 foot, eyes closed, now. 30 seconds later, now. The interesting thing about that, what I learned about mental focus was every time I said now, I was within about 0.2 of a second every time I said it. That was the amount of focus it took, or that I didn't realize I had, I guess. So as I was saying now, it literally was within about 0.2 of a second every time I said it, while standing on 1 foot with my eyes closed doing Tai Chi.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
How long did it take to get to that point?
Oh, that was a good 6 to 8 months of training before that. And again, that was the next step. I went from ASA and then hired an ARCA team. So we had time to kind of prepare for those races. I only ended up doing 4 ARCA races, which the first one was Charlotte. The second one was Talladega. And then we went to Atlanta. And then the last one was Daytona.
Gotcha. So you mentioned there was time in between. What did the transition look like?
There were a few moves in there that I kind of skipped past. So I started in Columbus, Ohio from 92 to 94. And then I moved to Michigan, lived there from 95 to 97. And then I moved to Minneapolis and drove for a different team there, Scott Lefevre Racing. Drove the Tecumseh #1 car in ASA in 1998. And then in 99, I moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina. Actually, Davidson was where I was living, just north of Charlotte. And that was kind of like the last step to try to become a NASCAR driver. And I ended up racing ARCA for Eddie Sharp Racing. And that was a number 33 car that we had some good runs. I qualified 8th at Charlotte, finished 8th. Talladega, I think we qualified 13th, ended up blowing a tire and crashed there. Atlanta, I think we qualified in the top 10, and I was running 3rd with about 10 laps to go. And we had a valve go bad, so I had dropped out of the race. And then Daytona, we qualified 5th. At 187, and we got caught on a green flag pit situation. We had to pit for tires. The green flag was out while the group of leaders were in the pit area. The caution flag came out, which immediately put all of us a lap down. So that group I was racing with, we never got our lap back. I think I ended up about 18th at Daytona. So
I remember I played high school baseball, and we got to play at like Fifth Third Field up in Toledo.
Yeah.
And that was like playing in the World Series to us because it was such a huge deal. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Daytona and Talladega. Mm-hmm. How did it feel to like step into that place that is like a hallowed ground?
It is. And not only is it hallowed ground, the ARCA race is always the week before the Daytona 500. So you have all of that going on with people. There's not that many people in the stands for the ARCA race, but you have the NASCAR truck teams. You had I just still call it Busch Grand National, even though it's Xfinity today, and the Cup Series. You had all those people there. So you had a lot of eyeballs on you. And you talk about a pressure cooker situation for somebody that's trying to become something. That's what it was. And you look up in the stands, and it's awe inspiring. Like, am I really here? Like, is this really happening right now? Yeah. I'm sure it's a similar feeling to what you had.
That was actually my next question. I want to talk about that. And honestly, racing for me was one of those sports where, I never really knew much about it until we went down to Daytona the day before a Daytona 500. And we went to the day before the Cup Series. And man, that was the greatest live sporting event I've ever seen in my entire life.
They know how to put on a good show.
Racing in person is amazing.
Totally different.
There's nothing like it. It is absolutely captivating.
Yeah,
Whether
it
you're
is.
into cars or not, it doesn't
And it's
matter.
different than just watching on TV. Probably like most sports, some sports can be boring to watch on TV, but if you're there live, it is not boring at all.
I agree, but still, I mean, I've been to a lot of live sporting events, hockey, football, baseball, and all. None of it compares to racing.
Yeah.
To this day, it's the greatest live sporting event I've ever been to. So,
In one hand, too, you get the smell, you get the sound, you get kind of more senses involved at a race for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So after ARCA, what was next?
So after ARCA, I did kind of as a last ditch effort. I ended up going back ASA racing because I had not secured a Grand National ride or a Cup ride. So I went back ASA racing, and this was probably the point where I recognized that a lot of stuff had happened in the 8 to 10 years that I had been racing at that point professionally. The crew chief that I had mentioned, his name was Chris Bradley. In 1998, he was tragically killed in a pit road accident, and it happened right next to my team that I was driving for. He was not my crew chief at the time. He was actually Adam Petty's crew chief, and they were pitting right in front of us at the Minnesota State Fair race. And unfortunately, we had adjustable sway bars on the car at the time that in order to adjust it, you had to crawl under the car to adjust it. Nobody was really doing that on pit stops. Chris thought he could get it done, and unfortunately, the crew really didn't know he was under the car. So the jackman dropped the car, Adam took off, and unfortunately, Chris was still under the car. So I mean, even talking about it today still, because as far as leaders go, everybody has somebody in their life that has a positive, strong influence on their life, and that's what Chris was for me. It's kind of one of the first guys that really, he helped me win my first race, so there was a lot of confidence in that. So that was one situation. And then it led into other situations of other drivers dying, ending with Dale Earnhardt Sr. So you had some ARCA drivers that were killed. Blaze Alexander, another gentleman that I raced with a lot, Tony Roper. And then Adam Petty, actually about a year later after Chris was killed, Adam was killed in an accident, ending with Dale Earnhardt Sr. And that was before the Hans device that all the drivers wear now. So I had never worn a Hans device, still hadn't to this day in any car that I raced. So again, going back to the last year, I went back ASA racing. It's kind of inside my own head at that time. Like, I don't know if this is for me. And quite honestly, what I didn't mention at Daytona, even though we had a good car and we had a pretty good run there, I had a lot of stuff going through my head during that race. Because you're in the draft. I was not used to the draft. I could do it. I just wasn't used to it. And I kept poking out of the draft, trying to look down the left side of the car in front of me. So my crew comes on the radio and says, hey, you need to get back in the draft. You're slowing yourself down, causing yourself some problems. I'm like, but I can't see. I just can't see around the car in front of me. So they came back over the radio and said, look through the windshield in the car in front of you, and look through the guy in front of his windshield and the guy in front of his windshield. That's how you see. I'm like, but I can't. They're like, that's the point. You just need to stay tucked in. If something's going to happen, you're just going to be a part of it. So I think I got that what if feeling. And anybody in racing at that point knows that when you get that what if feeling, you're going to cause more problems than not. And so I think it probably still took another year for me to recognize that, yeah, it's my time. And so I went back to ASA racing. We tried to make the first race of the year in 2001 at St. Augustine Speedway in Florida. Had a good car. Unfortunately, we didn't qualify well because I had crashed in practice. Somebody came out on the track in front of me, and rather than hit that car, I spun my car out to avoid it and backed it in the fence. So I had to stuff that car in the trailer. We pulled out our backup car, and we were in the last chance race. I had to finish in the top 3 to transfer. I was in third, and there was a crash right in front of the lead group, and we all got tangled up. So I went home, never made the race, and had 2 destroyed race cars. And that's when I realized that's it.
Gotcha. So as far as looking at your whole racing career, another question I have is sponsorships is huge. Mm-hmm. And, a driver is a big part of, who gets what sponsor. Sure. Do you have any advice or maybe give us kind of a behind the scenes look into getting sponsorships and what that looked like for you?
So at the time, I don't know that the concept is any different today. I think how you go about it might be different. But at the end of the day, sponsorships are what make the world go around. And fans are actually what makes it go around. And then people that come to watch those races spend their money on those products and services, right? So at the end of the day, I think not doing it for yourself, not standing in front of a sponsor telling them how good you are and how much money you can make them. It's more of what you can provide them, not what they can provide you. And I think trying to marry that together, a product that you believe in, but also that you have something to give back to them, not just trying to take from them.
Gotcha. So obviously in sponsorships, some of these people are very high net worth, very accomplished. Some of them can be really intimidating.
Correct.
Was there some maybe tips and tricks or an approach that really helped you develop when approaching these people?
Well, I don't know. I was always very intimidated to go talk to sponsors, and that was part of what grew me up pretty fast. Was that part of my thing that I needed to do was help fund the race team, and that required going to talk to sponsors. And I was 19, 20, 21 years old. So actually, when I was 18 years old, I think the one thing that my dad did that I didn't like at the time, but I think provided me a good base to start with, was he sent me to a Dale Carnegie speaking course. So I'm 18 years old in this group with 40 and 50-year-olds that are all corporate minded. They were all there and it was in Columbus. And I'll never forget that basically they went around the room and they would do impromptu interviews. So you'd stand up in front of the class and you didn't know what you were going to talk about. And they'd say, whatever it was you wanted to talk about, you had 5 minutes to talk about it. So I get up in front of the room and they said elephants. And I had 5 minutes to talk about elephants. I didn't know the first thing about an elephant. And the point of that exercise, though, really is don't talk about things you don't know about. Interact with the group. Okay, I don't know much about elephants. I know there are a few that look different, but I don't know where they're from. And I started interacting with the group. And I think it was just the fact that you don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't try to act like you know something that you don't. Just be real. I think at the end of the day, people pick up on that. And you can see it a mile away if somebody's trying to be something they're not, essentially. So I think that's what maybe helped me in the sponsorship side, was basically just being genuine, being me, and being real.
How have you passed that on to maybe your family, your employees, other people in your life? Because I can tell that made a big difference for you and you've carried that with you. So what have you done to pass that on?
I think it kind of in a bigger picture too is the team aspect. And, we saw a lot, and you can see it in any kind of sport you want to point at. The best team doesn't always win. The best communicating team sometimes can win, so the best car, I'll put it this way, sometimes the best car doesn't win, but the best team does. So you may not have the fastest car, you may not have the fastest pit crew, but if you all are what we call if you all gelled together at that time, you can move mountains. And I think that's that I could parlay into today is, I think my real responsibility at Raabe are a couple things. One is being a steward of Raabe Ford's been around over 100 years at this point, 103 years. I didn't start it, clearly. I wasn't there when it started, but I think at the end of the day, our dealership was founded on some basic principles that weren't really defined. But I think that's kind of what I did, was try to understand what can I take from racing and running a race team, and all that communication that I've learned. How do I put that into a dealership setting where we had 3 to 4 to 5 guys? Now when I came to Raabe, we had 33 people. Now we're up to about 60. But how do I take that same concept and get everybody to work together and understand we're all different, but we're all trying to row in the same direction, so to speak. And that's just through some pointing out, kind of like at Raabe. We do some things that are pretty basic. We've got to have genuine care. That's one thing. If you don't care about your customer, they're not going to care about you. We try to give as much transparent information as we can, give you all the information you can to make a decision, and then we don't pressure anybody into anything. So the one thing I say to every employee that we have is, do not sell anything to anybody. Help them find what it is they want to buy. It's just a little tweak in the mindset. People see that coming a mile away. So it's pretty basic. At the end of the day, I try to remove myself from doing too much of the day-to-day stuff, because I literally will mess something up. And like we were talking before the show, that, if somebody comes in and they know me and they don't know anybody else there and they want me to help them sell a car, I certainly take the information, help them, And then I said, by the way, do you mind dealing with one of my sales managers and maybe a salesman? Because I will probably mess something up if I do it, but I'm here to walk hand in hand with you to make sure you get the best deal and all of that all the way. So
That's awesome. So if we could just kind of transition, you get out of racing, you move home, what's next? What did that transition look like?
Yeah, so that transition, the race I was describing when I came home with 2 wrecked race cars, my dad was there, but my family supported me at every race I was at. My sister was actually a tire carrier for me. My aunt, she used to do all the scoring and timing. My mother made the food. She prepped all the food for everybody. Of course, she was emotional support for me. My dad was kind of like the ringleader. And so it truly was a family sport. So when it came time to, I didn't tell him that I mentally had checked out at that point. It was probably the next day or 2 days later that I called him and I said, hey, you probably saw me. I was pretty emotional after that race. And I said, at this point, I think that I need to go ahead and step back and reassess what my future is. And I said, I've always had this idea in the back of my head. I grew up working for you. And I know that's an easy thing to come back to, but I don't necessarily want you to make it easy on me. When I graduated at high school, I was a service advisor. So when you go to a dealership and you bring your car in to get worked on, I was the person that took your keys and wrote down what you needed done to your car. I said, if you'd be willing to have me back, I'll just pick up right where I left off. I was 30 years old at that time, but I figured if I'm going to learn this business, I got to just kind of continue on where I had left off. So that's what I did. And I said, do you mind me coming back? And he said, no, I'd love to have you back. When do you want to come back? I said, there's the hard part. I don't know just yet. At that point in my life, I was still very deep into racing, had a lot of good connections. And I called him about a week later and I said, I think I need 1 year. I want to keep 1 foot in the racing door and 1 foot out. So I took a job with Simpson Race Products. Simpson Race Products make all the helmets, all the suits, all the fire gear that teams wear. So I was their product rep and I was their helmet guy, basically for the Cup Series and the Busch Grand National Series. So I drove their product rig to 30 of the 36 NASCAR races that year in 2002 and got to meet a lot of people. And again, long story short, I got to talk to Jeff Gordon again at that point in time. I hadn't talked to him in years. And of course, he remembered who I was. And this is a story I don't tell too many people. I don't even know why I'm going to tell it here because it seems pretty far-fetched, but it's actually true. He came on the trailer one day and he said, what are you doing? Why aren't you driving anymore? I'm like, well, I kind of got in my own headspace. A number of guys got killed. Dale just died last year. I don't know what the future is for me. And so we had this really brief conversation. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he went off to get in his car. And 15 years later, my dad, out of the blue, he said, we were talking about something, and I think we were talking about Jeff Gordon. He goes, hey, did he ever talk to you in the Cup garage at all? I'm like, yeah, there was one time that he did. And it was a really brief conversation. He goes, yeah, he was kind of interviewing you. I'm like, what do you mean by that? He said, well, they were looking to form this new team, and they were kind of fishing around for drivers, and he just kind of wanted to know where you were at and what you were doing. Well, it was the following year they had the 48 team that Jimmy Johnson drove. And it was kind of an interesting time because I still look back at that. I have zero regrets about the decisions I made. I'm right where I'm supposed to be based on the decisions I made. But to realize I was just like that close, makes me feel good inside. And I'm very humble about having that opportunity, but no regrets that I didn't make it.
Yeah. So what'd you learn from that?
Humbleness. I mean, just realizing that where my lane is and just stay in my own lane. Not that racing wasn't my lane, but at that point in time, I recognized. I saw also, I think it helped me see other people that ended up, whether it be a divorce or spending all their own money or leverage their house or leverage everything they had to keep racing because they just wanted to make it to the next level. And I think I just had enough understanding and seeing that happen time and time again. Plus I had a family business that I think was, it also had helped fund my career. So in a way of me coming back to Lima and getting back into the family business was a way to pay back what my father had done for me.
It's amazing. So I guess, going to 30 out of 36 races for the Cup Series, that had to be fun, even though it was brief. Is there
Right.
any good stories or maybe some good lessons or fun things that you did over there?
There were a lot of fun things. So this was in 2002 that I worked for Simpson, and I had traveled to a couple races the prior year, and then I ended up doing the 24 hours of Daytona prior to going to the Daytona 500. But my first official gig was Simpson. Now the deal was, if anybody that worked for Simpson, I'm sorry, let me say it a different way. Anybody that drove a vehicle that wore Simpson's product, if they won a race, we got to go down into Victory Circle and be part of the hat dance, right? So they go through all the product sponsors and they wear all the different hats. We were one of the sponsors. So Ward Burton ended up winning the Daytona 500. And it's the only time I ever took the opportunity to go to Victory Circle and get my picture taken with he and Tommy Baldwin and Bill Davis. So I still have that picture on my wall today.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. Another one was that Ward Burton, the reason I did that was I had developed a relationship with him. He was a pretty cool guy, and he used to come to my trailer almost every week. And he wanted his helmet adjusted, and I was the guy that knew how to put him together and adjust the pads and make it fit him right. But at the end of the day, I don't really think it was the helmet that didn't fit him. He was a closet smoker, and he just wanted a place to go smoke a cigarette before he got in the race car. And so while I would work on his helmet, he would stand outside the trailer and have his cigarette. I'd give him his helmet back, and then he'd go get in the car. So that's like a behind-the-scenes story that most people don't know.
Was that ever acknowledged or just...
No, it was kind of like a handshake deal. I didn't tell anybody, and so I became his little buddy that, he'd come over and have a cigarette before he'd get in the race car.
That's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Another quick story I'll tell you about ASA racing, and because I was just talking about smoking, was Dick Trickle is a guy that used to race in the ASA series. A lot of people have heard about him. I was in a race with him at Minnesota State Fairgrounds, and it's the first and only time this had ever happened. But I learned that it was actually a kind of a trick that he knew about because he had been racing so long. He used to smoke on caution flags. So if caution flag came out, he had a pack of cigarettes duct taped to the door, and he had the old school lighter like the old cars used to have. So he'd light a cigarette on caution flags. Well, so we get the one to go before green, and we're in the middle of 3 and 4, and all of a sudden this big flash of sparks goes right across my windshield, and I'm just like, what was that? And next thing I know, everybody's taking off, and I'm still back here. Well, Dick Trickle had figured out that if he flicked it out at the right angle, it would hit my windshield and cause me to lose my focus, and they all took off.
That's amazing.
That can't be legal.
I know, right?
Oh, that's great though. I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I remember I played basketball, and I was never like the tallest player, but I did what I could. And my grandpa one time he'd played, and he was never that tall either. He said, when they go to jump, step on the back of their shoes.
Oh, yeah.
Shoes will come off, and that's when you grab the ball. I said, okay, Grandpa. That worked for me for 4 years. It was great.
See? Once you know, you know.
Yeah.
Tricks of the trade.
Mm-hmm. Your old window cleaner is trash. Ditch it and get Dudley on duty. It's what the pros use.
All right, Joe. So now let's transition. You're moving back home. Kind of, what does life back in Northwest Ohio kind of look like? How'd that transition go?
Well, again, coming back to the family business, there were a lot of people that I knew. There were a lot of new people that I didn't know. And trying to fit into a family business where you have, we had, I think, over 100 employees at that point in time was, again, just trying to fit in, just trying to be part of the team, not trying to stand out, not trying to act like I'm somebody that I'm not. And I think that just try to earn some credibility, right? And just being a part of the team and owning my own mistakes. Again, I keep mentioning being genuine, being real. And part of that is owning your own mistakes. And I think that helped a lot. I learned a lot. I came back into Allen Nott as a service advisor. Then I got into, internet was kind of booming at that point in time, and started an internet sales department, which then ended up being a used car department. And then I started doing some used car buying at the auction. So kind of one thing, again, led to another. I haven't done everything in the dealership. There are a lot of moving parts in a dealership. And it's like, if you think about any dealership, there's 3 or 4 businesses under one roof, new car sales, used car sales, parts, service, and they all kind of have to stand on their own. And learning, being able to work in the dealership for a number of years, and then being able to be where I'm at now and being able to kind of look at it objectively from a higher level, or from a different angle, I should say, is seeing how, you pull a string in one spot, it might pull it negatively in another spot. So it's just being aware of that kind of stuff. And the one thing I always try to do, again, is remove myself, because I feel like at times I do more to slow the business down than I do to help it. So it's recognizing that other people are much better at a lot of things than I am, and being okay with that. I think that was the big life lesson, is hiring good people and getting out of their way.
Yeah. Was that taught? Was that learned? And then how do you practically implement that?
It was learned until it was taught. I think I went to my dad one day and I said, I literally said that, I think I'm doing more to slow this program down than I am. And he said, now you're getting it. So yeah, just remove yourself. And the other thing too is, everybody has a bad day once in a while, right? Sometimes you have to check your bad day at the door, or you're almost better off to take a personal day that day, because again, and really, regardless what business you're in, or what position you're in, if you bring that negative attitude to work, what's the one thing they always say? What you put off is what you should expect in return, right? So I don't know. It just kind of seems like I'd be better off to stay at home with a negative attitude than I am to come into work with one.
Yeah, of course. So I don't know. You constantly bring up your father and how he kind of helped you, has given you invaluable advice, both in racing and dealerships. What was it about your dad that you hope to pass on to not only your kids, but everybody else you meet?
It's pretty basic: patience and understanding. He had so much patience and understanding in watching me make a lot of dumb mistakes and wrong moves and all of that. But had he told me what to do, I would have never learned it on my own. And I think that was the biggest thing, is him having patience and understanding long enough that I feel like at some point the transition of owning a dealership was just natural. It just happened. It didn't have to be forced. I had been through enough. And again, he basically had told me that you don't have to be an expert at every position in this business. You just have to understand how all the pieces work together. And when one piece is missing, how to put that piece back and not have it affect another part of the business.
That's amazing. So let's talk about your growth and development, and then maybe eventually the transition there. What was, after you're there a couple of years, kind of what'd you move into? What was the natural progression?
So coming back into the dealership in 2003, basically I'd spent about 5 years at Nott Honda Toyota, and then that led to the next progression of my career, which I basically went to my dad's office one day and I said, hey, I have this idea, and I think it's probably time for me to get out from under your wing. I felt like I had grown enough at that point that I need to get out and kind of figure this out on my own. And I said that to him. I need to figure this out on my own. And he said, I think it'd be great for you to go down there. Try not to call me too much. And his point with that was, the other thing he said, try not to call me too much. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to cost me money. But if you're not doing that, you're not learning and you're not growing. And that gave me the freedom to understand I don't have to worry about making mistakes. I have to worry about making them twice. But basically, at the end of the day, he's saying, if you're not learning, if you're not growing, if you're not making mistakes and costing me money, you're not growing fast enough. And so he gave me the freedom to kind of fail and learn from failing, essentially. So in 2008, I told him I'd like to go down to Raabe Ford and kind of learn the Ford side of business. Raabe was also a component of my racing career. They helped fund the race team. So again, it's paying it back to them. Well-established business already, there for a number of years since 1922. And I think at that point, I was just used car manager, buying cars, buying used cars, appraising cars. And then at some point, it needed to be the general manager. And that was a difficult thing. We had a well-established person there. And what do you do when there's a general manager and now that's your position that you need to do? And again, that comes back to having relationships with people and trying to build a business and help people understand the direction that it's going. It doesn't always go well, unfortunately. So then I ended up becoming general manager, and then just 3 or 4 years ago became owner. So here I am at 53, and I'm just now being an owner, but it was a very natural progression. Unfortunately, my dad passed away 3 years ago with Alzheimer's. But the reason why I bring that up is because when he told me not to call him too much, learn how to fail, you're going to cost me money. Even though I miss him immensely today, I don't feel like I have to call him at all for anything that ever happens in business. I can hear him in my head because he filled my head with so much good information that whenever a situation arises, I can literally hear him speaking to me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So one thing I am curious about, and share as much as you're comfortable, but working with family can be difficult. Especially if you're starting a new business venture and you have family backing you. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of give us as much detail about, maybe advice working with family, or how much your dad backed you, or things you'd recommend, things you wouldn't recommend?
That can be a slippery slope. Family and business don't always work out, and it just is. That's the way life is, right? There's a reason why White's Honda Toyota is White's Honda Toyota today, but there's no worry about, it just is what it is. Sometimes family and business don't work out. That was a situation that I learned from. Now, my son is 16 years old and working for me at Raabe Ford. He's washing cars. Same thing I did when I started. And so I think, without getting into too much detail, just understanding that it's immensely harder for family in business than it is to not have family in business. You have a lot of personalities, and then there's money involved, and that brings a whole different level of reactions. So basically, I enjoy the car business. I love cars. I've loved being in an automotive family, and so I love what I do every day. It's something different every day. There's always something different that happens every day. But my goal at this point in life is to continue being a steward of Raabe Ford. That's kind of what I tell myself. I didn't start it. I'm just here to kind of carry forward the best things about Raabe Ford, because ultimately I'm not going to own it in the future. At some point I'm going to pass away and somebody else needs to own it. So I'm just a steward for this point in time that this business is in existence. And if I can provide an opportunity for my son or my daughter, who, if they have an interest in it, then I'm going to provide that for them. And if ultimately they decide they don't want it, or if I may have to make a decision whether they're good enough for it. And that's where it gets really challenging, is having those hard conversations with your family that have to be had.
Yeah. Is there anything when you have those hard conversations, because at the end of the day, you're family. I mean, you don't get to pick them. They're there with you, whether you like it or not. And yeah, money complicates things. And I mean, business is tough.
Right.
And, some people like to make it personal really quick, and it's not personal, it's business.
Yeah.
Making that separation is really tough.
Is difficult, right? But I think, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'd have to believe that no matter what situation that you're in, if you get the short end of the stick and it was done, you're not happy with whatever the decision was, if it was done respectfully, you could look back and say, you know what, years later, whatever it is, I recognize that, and it was for the right reasons. Whichever side that you're on, you may have to let a family member go, or you may be let go by a family member. And once you get all the emotion out of the way, then you can really see for what it really is.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Hopefully somebody can cling to that.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
Never is.
Right.
So, go ahead.
When you told your dad kind of that you wanted to go kind of on your own, do your own thing, and branch out and just see what else is out there, and he told you, don't call him too much, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned after doing so, after kind of going out and exploring?
There's a lot of failures along the way. It's just trying to decide on which failure it was. Probably just in buying and selling cars. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, is, buying cars right, providing a value for the end customer. And I think there was a point in time where I just thought, hey, I could buy a car at an auction and turn around and sell it for XYZ. And that just isn't the case. And I was buying cars for too much money and having to sell them at a loss. And that provided a very valuable lesson that cost the business a lot of money at that point in time. I thought I was doing good for our customers. I thought I was doing good by buying good cars, but I was having to pay good money for them. But at the end of the day, the value is in the eye of the beholder. The vehicle's only worth what somebody will pay for it. And of course, there's a lot of market data research out there now that makes it a lot easier to determine what the value of a vehicle is. There was still a fair amount back then, but at the point that I'm trying to make is I just was over aggressive and learned a lot in a short amount of time by spending way too much money.
What's one thing about running a car dealership that nobody would ever know or nobody thinks about that's a big deal?
I think what I described just a few minutes ago is that it really is 3 to 4 businesses under one roof that all have to stand on their own 2 feet. And in the auto business, there's this thing called the iron wall, and it generally is between sales and service. And so you have 2 different groups of people that don't really ever see each other's day. You have a lot of mechanics and advisors that are deeply ingrained in what they're doing, and same thing with salespeople. Now, you're going to see more salespeople venture back to service because they have customers that come in. But on the flip side, you don't get many technicians or advisors that get to come up to the sales side to see what's really happening. So every dealership knows what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, the people are, when they're buying a vehicle, they're happy about that. Nobody's ever happy about having to service their vehicle and pay for an oil change or a tire or that kind of stuff. So I always say the back end of the dealership is absolutely the most thankless job, and they have to put up with a lot of stuff. But you have to have some thick skin, but you also have to be a very good communicator. Because again, I don't want these people selling anything to anybody. I want them to help people find what it is that they need or that they want to buy. I think, if you just have that little tweak on the mindset, give them the information and let them make a decision on their own. Nobody wants pressured into a decision. Nobody wants sold something that they don't know is earning somebody else an incentive. So we really don't do any incentives in that regard, or, I don't put $500 on a hood of a car to make that car go away, because that car would get sold to somebody that doesn't need it, can't afford it, and doesn't want it.
Yeah. So I guess kind of looking towards now and the future as far as business is concerned, is there anything you can give us that you're like, this is something I want to do, I have a goal, I haven't quite done it yet, or maybe a big thing you're going through right now, maybe something new? What's going on?
So I think all of us are, I guess I could speak for all of us, is AI, and how does it fit into the automotive space? It already is. I'm just trying to figure out how does it fit into a rural Northwest Ohio dealership when we really somewhat pride ourselves on the communication and being able to take care of people. This is one thing that my dad described to me a long time ago, was that, son, we're in rural Ohio. We have to do more business on purpose than metro stores do by accident. So meaning that we take care of people. We don't have the problem of numbers of people coming in the door, right? So I think at the end of the day, how does AI fit into that, but without feeling like we're a corporate store? We still want to be down home, family owned, take care of people. I feel like all retail businesses, they all sell a product or a service, but at the end of the day, it's still a people business. If you don't take care of people, you're not going to have that person to buy your product or service anymore. So I don't know. That seems to be kind of like where things are going now. There's a lot of ways that AI can help, but we're still learning how that can be.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you still involved in racing at all, or is that more in your past?
So driving is definitely in my past. I certainly am a fan to some degree at these, but the thing about racing with me is in most things I do, I'm either an all in or all out kind of guy. So it's hard to go to a racetrack and watch. I've always been on the inside of the fence rather than the outside of the fence. So it kind of gets my blood pumping again, and like I want to go drive that car, So I kind of have to go with some reservation, but also with the mindset like, hey, I'm going to be a fan, and I'm only a fan. That's all I'm ever going to be at this point. But I do support a few people locally, and some young people that I like to see, have an opportunity. So yeah, I try to do it from that angle, as far as trying to financially support a few people. It's not much money, but if it helps them kind of get to the next step of whatever their path is, then I feel good about that.
Absolutely.
Kind of an interesting question. I was always curious, looking into your background, a lot of car experience. Mm-hmm. What was it about Ford that you loved? because you really could have gone in any direction, and you landed on Ford.
Yeah.
Why them?
Well, I guess, I mean, being that my father, and this is another probably unknown that people don't realize, is that my father purchased Raabe Ford in 1989. So we've owned that store for a long time. We just never really advertised it more so until I came in there around 2008 and started doing some commercials for them. So I think that that's just one thing that kind of my family owning Ford was, and then driving a Ford race car. I've driven a Pontiac race car. I've driven a Chevy Monte Carlo race car, and there's no real comparison. I mean, race car is a race car at the end of the day. It's how you prepare it and all of that. So I guess just being in the family, but what I've learned about Ford since being at Raabe Ford and a lot of, so I'm a quote guy. I love reading a lot of quotes. Henry Ford has a lot of great quotes. I could rattle off a number of them, but I'd probably bore you to death with that.
I mean, you save that for the end.
Yeah.
I'll ask that. Okay, interesting. So maybe we should just transition maybe to one of our final segments. It's our quick fire question segment.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So we just ask you a list of questions. You just answer as quick as possible, whatever first comes to mind.
Okay.
So the first question.
Blueberries. I just had a blueberry muffin, so that's what's on my mind.
That's awesome.
Well, now I'm hungry. Thanks.
No, the first question is tea or coffee to start the day?
Coffee.
Coffee, just 1 cup?
1 to 2.
1 to 2.
Yeah.
Okay. And then only in the morning, you drink it throughout the day?
Only in the morning, and I've been informed by my daughter, who was working at 7 Brew, that I am old because I still drink my coffee hot.
I mean, I enjoy hot coffee.
I do too, so I don't quite understand that one, but I'll take her word for it.
Yeah, I'm an iced coffee girl until forever, and my grandma only drinks hot coffee, and she's like, iced coffee's not even real. I'm like, but it is, and it's so much better. What do you mean?
Yeah. All right. So, Joe, favorite local business besides your own?
Favorite local business besides my own? Boy, there's a lot. Cupie.
Great answer. I love Cupie.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, who doesn't? All right. One word to describe entrepreneurship.
Oh, that's a good one. Resilience.
That's good. And when you say resilience, what sparks that? What comes to mind?
Just being able to persevere through good and bad and everything in between. That, resilience really means that you're kind of heading in a direction and you don't let the flavor of the day derail the direction that you're heading in. So you have to be resilient to all the fray that's happening.
So I guess we do like to ask everybody for their favorite quote.
Okay.
So what's your favorite quote?
Oh boy, there's so many. The first one that comes to mind, Henry Ford said, any person can buy a vehicle in any color they want, so long as it's black.
Yeah.
And that was a time when people could buy a different color, but it was cheaper for Ford to make it in black. So he was trying to say you can buy a vehicle in any color you want so long as it's black, hoping that people would just buy a black car and it wouldn't cost him as much money. But before that, one of my favorite ones, it's kind of funny, that Henry said was, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
That's an amazing quote.
Yeah, that's kind of earth-shattering.
That's a brilliant quote.
Right. So that's basically, he was going in a lane that nobody had gone before, trying to develop an automobile. And if he just did what everybody else wanted, he's basically saying that they just wanted a faster horse.
Yeah, that's so good. All right. Favorite car you've owned?
Okay.
Favorite car that maybe you will never or you hope to own in the future? And what was your first car?
My first car was built the year I was born. So it was a 1972 VW Bug with a cherry bomb exhaust and a convertible top.
That's incredible.
That's amazing.
That's an amazing first
You don't
car.
still have it, do you?
Unfortunately, I don't. I wished I did, though. Yeah. I've owned and driven a lot of really fun cars. I guess the current car that I own probably is my favorite one. I just took possession of it this year. It's a Mustang GTD. GTD stands for Grand Touring Daytona, so it's a limited series Mustang that is basically starts as a dark horse Mustang and gets sent to a company called Multimatic. They're in Ontario, Canada, and that car gets basically stripped apart, widened. It's 4 inches wider than the standard Mustang. Has a full carbon body, carbon ceramic brakes. It's basically a GT3 race car for the street. That's street legal.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is
Yeah.
gorgeous car.
Really enjoy that car. And the funny thing about that was 2 weeks before I took delivery of that, I happened to be watching Jay Leno's Garage. A lot of us have seen those episodes, and it was the one I happened to just click on without knowing was him taking delivery of his GTD with the CEO of Ford Motor Company. And I just thought, wow, that's really cool. You know, that'll never happen to me. But then the next clip that I saw was that his car and my car are 99% identical to each other's. He got the same lightning blue, the same performance pack, the same exposed carbon. Really, it boiled down to the only differences between Jay Leno's car and mine are the caliper color and the seat color.
Oh my goodness.
That's so cool.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay. So maybe dream car or maybe one you hope to own in the future.
There's that again. That's almost endless right there. So I don't even know. And I you know, there's a lot of foreign sports cars that I really like. You know, I think McLaren's really on a pretty awesome track right now with the cars they're building. I've always been a fan of like the Ferrari F40, F45, F50s. I think as I get older, I become less and less of a fan of Ferrari because of all the stuff they put their customers through in order to buy a Ferrari. Not that I'll ever necessarily own one or that, but I try to stay in my own wheelhouse again. American car, American product.
Yeah.
LaFerrari's pretty cool car. So, you know, Lamborghini. So probably I think one of the coolest front engine rear wheel drive cars that I really like is the Mercedes AMG GT Black Series, and a Porsche GT3 RS. Those are two really cool cars. But the interesting thing about that is the Mustang GTD that I have was built specifically to compete with those two cars. So at the Nürburgring, that's what the kind of the claim to fame with the Mustang GTD is, that it's one of the first. Well, it's the first American production car to do a sub 7-minute lap at the Nürburgring, which is a 12.9 mile track with roughly 70 some turns in it. And it did a 7:56, I think, the first time they went there, and they weren't happy with that, and they went back and they did sorry, did I say 7? I meant 6:56. Yeah. And then they did a 6:52, I think, the second time. And they ended up being beat by the Corvette ZR1. And I think that's a great rivalry right now, which I really love, the fact that Ford and GM have a rivalry again.
Who doesn't love that?
I mean, go America.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah.
You know, I think Americans have, to some degree, in that IMSA racing and GT3 type racing, we just haven't had much competition in there. And now you have Ford that's gotten back into the racing again in that regard, and now we have a rivalry. So you have this back and forth. So the Corvette ZR1, ZR1X, they both beat the GTD time. Well, then our CEO of Ford said, "Okay, GM, game on." And that was a post he made on social media. So they're actually back there now with the GTD with some more, I think, aerodynamic front dive planes, splitters on the front end, and then they have these interesting wheels on the back that help divert air. And I don't know that they do anything for downforce, but I think they maybe help pull some air out of the car. So again, they're just back there trying to go quicker so they can beat the ZR1 time, and then I'm sure GM will be back to try to beat the GTD time. So at the end of the day, it's just, again, I love that rivalry because who wins? America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, everything about that. I always love the Ford GM headbutting. It's incredible. And I think that's what they need to be doing. I mean, they're America, they're industry leaders. They need to be out there doing that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just,
and Ford is this is what I like about Ford as well, is that they're not afraid to put their neck on the line, and they love racing. And when, you know, racing started when the second car was built, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ford has basically stated that they are going to be in all forms of racing. They're going to be in Formula One next year with Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team. They're going to have the engine in that car. And then they're also going to be at all levels of IMSA racing. So they're going to have the prototype. They're going to have a GT3. They're going to have everything that IMSA has to offer. When they go to 24 hours, they're going to be in every class. So I think it's going to cost them a lot of money, but it's also going to kind of build that excitement for people that are really truly love cars. And again, it kind of comes back to that GM and Ford battle back and forth too.
Amazing. You guys have any other questions?
I do not.
Just to say thank you to our wonderful guest and to iHeart Studio for having us in here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Joe. And we will have, all the ways to get a hold of you and Raabe Ford in the description and the show notes. And I just want to say thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for having me and having a chance to tell my story. And now I'll get to see how I sound in real life, I guess. So
Yeah, it was a blast. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.
See you.